This will be our season wrap-up show at the John Krasinski Show. I think this season was a blast. Doing this podcast this season was a blast. Doing the live shows at Head Flyer Brewing, having Governor Walz on. Everything, I think, was great. I am going to hit John with a realization I've had over the last few days, though. So let's get into that here on the John Krasinski Show. We want to thank one of our newer sponsors across the TalkNorth.com platform, Princeton's Liquors in Maple Grove. Another new sponsor, Chewy Vision Institute. Thanks also to TSR Injury Law, Head Flyer Brewing, Shepherd Goods, and Lamb Chops clothing line. We're coming to you from the Aquarius Home Services studio. He's John Krasinski from The Athletic. I'm Jim Suhan from the Star Tribune. Brandon Morton is our producer, as he has been for so many years. Best way to listen to this show or any show at TalkNorth.com. Subscribe to your favorite podcast app. It's free. It's the easiest way to listen, and we do appreciate it. All right, John, talking to people outstate, talking to fans, talking to people I run into over the weekend, I think there's a huge divide between the way the people who run the Timberwolves think, the way the people who cover the Timberwolves think, and the people who just have been watching the games and getting really excited and maybe depressed when they lost at the end of the season. The sense I've gotten from people outside the business is, okay, they lost, so they got to get rid of either Cat or Gobert or both. They got to find a free agent. They got to try some new stuff. Ant was kind of disappointing that last series. It feels like I feel the farther you are away from the corporate offices at Target Center, the more you just think you lose, you change things. I feel like when you talk to Tim Connolly, when you talk to Finch, when you talk to people who cover the team, the sense is, God, why wouldn't you keep this group together? Look what they did this year. A little more continuity, a little more maturity from Ant, a little bit a tick up offensive productivity. This might be a championship team. Where do you think the truth lies between what we get from Finch, Connolly, and what you hear from fans who are probably a little nervous about this team?
Yeah, I mean, I think that there's a couple of things that are sort of conflicting right now in terms of like those views. And I think that from the fan side of things, from what I have been able to gather, I think I'm along with you, Jim, in terms of, in general, fans very satisfied with this season, very happy with what they saw from the team. Of course, disappointed that it ended the way that it did. But if there are fans that want to see changes, that want to see Cat traded, that want to see, kind of that believe that this team needs to do something more significant to go from contender to like real viable championship contender, I think it feels a little bit like the Kirk Cousins conversation where I think that, because Cat has been here for so long and because he did not play well in the Western Conference Finals, I think that there is just an assumption that, okay, he's the weak link here. We've got to move on from him and improve that position to give the Timberwolves a real chance to get to the finals, to win a championship. I think where it conflicts with internally is that I do believe that Tim Connolly and Chris Finch look at Karl-Anthony Towns and say, man, he had a great season, all-star season, showed a lot of improvement defensively, made some adaptation and adjustment to playing the power forward spot that really helped us get to where we were. And the issue becomes then, if you're going to make a trade, which is, it's possible, you could look to make a Karl-Anthony Towns trade. Right now the priority has gone from, hey, maybe we need to look at the luxury tax and get below that, or maybe we need to just kind of reconfigure a little bit that way, to now the priority is, we still have to be very, very good. We have to be, we do not want to take a step back competitively when we make a trade. And when you try to look at the league's landscape and say, let's make a Karl-Anthony Towns trade, it's much more difficult to come up with a viable scenario where you make the trade and you are better than you were on the floor before he left. And so I think that's kind of the thing that is probably sticking with Tim Connolly and Chris Finch, is that continuity helped last year going into this year. It could help even more this year going into next season. And we want to stay really, really talented. And maybe the best way to do that is to keep Karl Anthony Towns around.
Yeah, and that's the way I'd vote as well. I understand Carl has always had a weird relationship with Minnesota fandom, but you just don't find many players like that, and it would be hard to replace. And if you lost him, you would miss the rebounding, the way he played defense this year, the 3-point shooting, and let's go back and remember too, he was a big factor in winning those first 2 series.
Yeah, and I mean, here's the real thing. Yeah, you're right on the first 2 series, Jim. I think people quickly forget about that because the lasting impression is him not shooting the ball well at all in the Western Conference Finals, him looking a little bit overmatched athletically in that Dallas front court. And so you say, gosh, we needed more. And you're right. Like, they did need more from Karl Anthony Towns and Anthony Edwards in the Western Conference Finals. But if you do move Karl Anthony Towns, you're immediately going to say, you know what we really need next to Anthony Edwards? We need a big guy who can shoot it.
Yep.
And so that's kind of the conundrum is you need a floor spacing big guy who can also rebound and help you there. And so a lot of the things that Karl Anthony Towns brings to the table is what you need next to Anthony Edwards. Now you can make an argument, well, you need a different kind. You need a little bit more. That's all true. But in many, many ways, what Karl Anthony Towns brings to the table is exactly what Anthony Edwards needs. Now, what the determination will have to be, can he make another step forward in going into year 10 that he did in year 9? Can the old dog learn some new tricks? And he showed it in year 9. They'll have to make a decision on where his ceiling is and if he's reached that or if there's another level for Towns to go. And I think so far internally, there's a belief that, Cat has a lot of improving that he can still do. And I think that this is going to be a situation where they just do not want to take a step back competitively. And so the more likely scenario today, things can change, but today is that he sticks around and that they run it back.
Yeah, so we're talking here on Monday in the week following the Timberwolves bowing out. To me, if we want to oversimplify things, and sometimes I do, I think the key stat in that series was that Luka's 25 and Ant's 22. I feel like this is Luka's time. He's been through the playoff grinder. He knows what it takes. He, as you can tell by his screaming and his body language, he wants to win it all right now. He thinks he has the team to do it. Kyrie is the perfect complement to him. Their trade deadline deals were brilliant and made them a great defensive team with these 2 great offensive players. And you could, Anthony even admitted it after the last game. You could tell he got a little worn down. And as Conley said, the guy's got sub 5% body fat. He's not in shape, but there's there's an ability to deal with the mental grind and the pressure. And I just don't know if you just do that without having experienced it first.
Yeah, yes, I think that's right, Jim. I mean, you heard it from Ant, you heard it from Naz Reid, you heard it from a bunch of people. I would say several of the Wolves after the loss is just that this is the first time they've played deep into May, and it is not just a physical grind; it is a mental grind. And I do think that in the Western Conference Finals, as much of a physical kind of mismatch as there was at times with some of the Mavericks versus the Wolves, I think it was much more mental. I mean, I think it was Luka and Kyrie knew exactly what they had to do, where they were going to get their shots, where the weaknesses in the Wolves defense was, all of those things. They knew how to attack it. They knew how to handle the attention that was coming with the big stage. They've been there before and they've done that. Whereas the Timberwolves, this was their first time. And I think that, we saw the Wolves wear the Denver Nuggets down in Game 7 and to the point where the Nuggets were just out of gas at the end of Game 7 and had nothing left. And that's what it felt like in Game 5 against the Mavericks, was that the Wolves had given everything that they had throughout these playoffs, and they were just a little out of gas. And so they could not mentally execute. You heard Chris Finch talk a lot about game plan mistakes and things like that. Well, that comes with mental fatigue. So you have that. You just have that, how difficult it was for them to run offense and get good shots. Dallas was getting easy shots all of the time. And the only game that they lost was the game that they really just could not make them at the clip that they normally do. Minnesota had to work so much harder for their offense because they weren't as in sync that way, and they could not identify weaknesses in the Dallas defense as easily and exploit them the way that the Mavericks did to them. So I think that it's a very good learning experience for them. I think that they go into this offseason with the understanding that there is so much more that you have to give in the playoffs. And I think that will help them tailor their workouts, kind of know what to expect coming into the season, all of those things. And you're right, like Luka being 25, having been in the conference finals before, having tasted it and understood it a little bit, that is the difference. His head was swimming, I think, a lot in this series. And sometimes you just have to go through these steps to finally break through. It's Michael Jordan lost in the conference finals twice. Kobe was swept out of the conference finals his first time. Dwayne Wade lost his first conference finals. Luka lost his first conference finals. Like, all of these great players get there, and usually they hit a wall and then they break through. And so I think that's got to be the plan going forward for Anthony Edwards.
No doubt about it. All right, I want to talk about seeding, the Mavericks, possible Timberwolves moves, Kyle Anderson, all kinds of other stuff. We do want to welcome a couple of our newer sponsors, starting with Princeton's Liquors in Maple Grove.
Princeton's Liquors in Maple Grove. Bill Princeton and the Princeton family have been Timberwolves fans forever. Bill even had an internship with the Wolves back in the day, summer of 2001. He wore the Crunch mascot. So if you're a Wolves fan, like many of you are here, Bill is one of your guys. You go to Maple Grove, Princeton's Liquors, you get some of the best craft beer selection in the metro area, and even in the state. They have THC seltzers and gummies, and a wide selection of those now that those are legal. And also bourbon is a massive focus for Princeton Liquors. If you're a bourbon aficionado, if you want unique, hard to find, high quality bourbons, then go to Princeton's Liquors. His family is a third generation booze slinger. His grandfather turned his confectionery store into a bar pretty much the day Prohibition flipped in 1933. So this family, the Princeton family, has been in the booze business forever and ever. You can trust them. They know quality when they see it, and they put together unbelievable selections of anything you could want beverage-wise at Princeton's Liquors in Maple Grove. So head on over there, Princeton's Liquors, Maple Grove. Best craft beer, best bourbons, THC seltzers and gummies, anything you could want, you'll find it at Princeton's Liquors in Maple Grove. Also want to thank our old guard, our old standbys, one of the first major sponsors on this network and on this show, TSR Injury Law. You know the deal. They're buddies with Naz Reid. They take good care of people. If you're injured, call 612-TSR-TIME, and they will not charge you unless they win your case, and they win a lot of cases. That's how they get to be buddies with Naz Reid. 612-TSR-TIME. Check them out, and I don't even have to tell you anymore. Just look at the billboards. Also want to welcome Chew Vision Institute. ChewVision.com, Chew Vision Institute. I was down there a couple of weeks ago, right before the Western Conference Finals started, and got just a terrific evaluation meeting with the folks at Chew Vision about my a possible LASIK surgery. And so they take you in, they put you through all the paces, they give you all the examinations, they really dive deep into your eye health and into your eye situation, and then they give you the best options that you could ask for from LASIK, from other vision correction options that are out there. They are not at all pushy. They are not, there's no pressure involved. They just want to help you get your eyesight to where you want it to be. And so now that the playoffs are over, I am going to head back fairly soon and get the LASIK because I was evaluated. It was determined that LASIK is a great option for me. So I'm going to give that a shot with True Vision Institute. But as I said before, there's many options that you can go through with True Vision to get your eyesight all fixed and all ready to go to where you want it to be. You could not ask for more friendly, more welcoming, more open and transparent folks than those at True Vision Institute in Bloomington. So go to truevision.com or give them a call in Bloomington and set up your appointment to go in and get your evaluation like I did. And you will enjoy the experience, I'm sure, as much as I did. And as we go on through the summer, I'll give you guys updates on how the surgery went, on how my vision is going. But I couldn't be more excited to be working with those good folks at True Vision Institute, truevision.com.
So I figured that the top 7 would come back. My real question in the exit interviews was, what happens to Kyle Anderson? And I kind of expected him to be the guy they just leave him free agency, use that money someplace else. And then, he comes in, says he wants to come back. Then Finch comes back and says he wants him back. And it sounded like Conley wants him back. Is that possible? Is it realistic?
Well, it is possible, certainly, Jim. And you're right. I think that, the thing that really obviously stood out to me that none of us, I think, had really been privy to before is Kyle said that his son is on the autism spectrum, that they have gotten really good support from the Minneapolis or Minnesota education system, and that he's having a really good time here with that. That's a very, very important factor in how he evaluates his options going forward. The other part that factors in the Wolves' favor in terms of keeping the Kyle Anderson that we discussed with him is that he is a very unique player. He is, unconventional. He has a different kind of game to him. And so I really believe he's one of those guys that needs to be in the right situation with the right coaching staff that believes in him if he's going to maximize his on-court performance. And I do believe that Kyle Anderson knows Chris Finch is firmly in his corner, that he believes in Kyle Anderson. Some fans may have said, well, Chris, you actually believed in him too much, but it certainly paid off in the Dallas series because I thought Kyle Anderson was one of their best players in the Dallas series. But so Kyle is going to have to weigh, his ability to fit into a team and with a coaching staff, the home life stuff, and whatever money opportunities become available to him as well. What I do wonder about is what is the market for Kyle Anderson going to be going into next year? He really struggled shooting the ball this year. We know that he was having eye issues and dealt with those. So it's possible that he goes to free agency and doesn't have a team that's willing to throw 10, 11, 12 million dollars at him per season, and that he may have to take a little bit of a lower salary, to get where he wants to go. And if that happens, maybe that brings the Timberwolves more into play, because I would have thought midseason, even late in the season, he's like, with the second apron, with all of the expenditures that the Wolves have, paying Kyle Anderson is going to be very, very difficult to do. It would be very difficult to retain him at $9, $10, $11 million a year. Like, I don't think that would be a possibility at all. But if that number comes down and comes down significantly, I think there is a chance that he could come back here and stay here, just for all of the reasons that we just discussed in terms of factoring him into his decision-making.
It's kind of fascinating that this is the town, and especially when it comes to the NBA, where everybody says, oh, nobody ever wants to go there. Nobody wants to sign there. But once you get somebody here, they might want to stay. Conley locked up. Kyle sounds like he wants to stay. Cat wants to stay despite his weird relationship with this fan base. Ant signed long-term. Rudy signed long-term. Once people get here, you actually have a chance of keeping them.
Yeah, it's kind of funny. And especially like when you get to play into May, and God forbid into June, like people who are around come around and say, you know what, the weather is not that bad here. This is pretty nice. And so the biggest thing obviously on that point, Jim, is that no one wants to come here to play and endure the winters and endure all that other stuff to play for a crummy team. Like that just doesn't, that's not on anyone's radar. But if you can build a very competitive team like the Milwaukee Bucks have, like several teams in cold weather climates have, and you build an infrastructure from an organizational standpoint that is very supportive of players and their families and all of those things, then it helps you mitigate a little bit of those concerns that you're always going to run into. There's always going to be questions about the weather. There's always going to be people who would rather be in Miami than here. That's understandable. Well, that's the way that it goes. But if you have Anthony Edwards here, if you have Tim Connolly and Chris Finch here, if you have a support system, a business side, and a basketball kind of operations department that really do a good job of taking care of the players, like I think the Wolves do, that can help the recruiting aspect a little bit. And I think you hit on it the best, Jim, is like it's even less about recruiting than retention. Like
Yep.
the people that you get in here, even if they're skeptical coming in, then they spend some time here, they have success here, they enjoy living here, then they want to stay. Naz Reid wanted to stay. Karl Anthony Towns wanted to stay. Mike Conley wanted to stay and took a pretty big pay cut to do it. Like there's a lot of that I think works in the Timberwolves' favor, especially now with what they have established with the organizational stability that they have, beyond the ownership stuff and all that. But like they have from a basketball standpoint, it's a very stable, very hospitable environment. And that can make dealing with some of the weather and all that stuff a little bit less of a hassle.
I think it's the podcast. I mean, if you
No
play for the
question.
Timberwolves, play for the Timberwolves, you get mentioned on the podcast. You leave the Timberwolves, we might not mention you.
Yeah, and I mean the opportunity to appear at Head Flyer Brewing, that is a big carrot that I know a lot of people within the Wolves organization will be using in their recruiting this summer. Is they'll show some of the videos that we posted with the big crowds and all of that stuff, and it absolutely will factor in and could be the thing that seals the deal for several new arrivals, and maybe even like for a Kyle Anderson who wants to stay.
It's going to be a factor in LeBron's future decisions.
No question.
Draft Bronny, tell him he can go to Head Flyer. Everything's done. And let's use that as a segue.
Head Flyer Brewing, Northeast Minneapolis. If you were there for the playoffs and watched games there, unbelievable crowds, just a crazy cool environment. The best news of it is they have great beers, great seltzers, great drinks to have and hang out with. But they also have unbelievable merchandise. They have a Bring Ya Ass Wolves t-shirt. They have a Crunch Time Wolves t-shirt. Like just really cool stuff. And so now that the season is over, you can still go there because guess what? The patio's open. The weather's going to be nice. Sit outside with your dog, sit outside with your friends and family, hang out, have a good time. They always have food trucks that are around. They'll have trivia nights during the week. They have always a lot of stuff going on at Head Flyer Brewing in Northeast Minneapolis. And I'm sure we will be back there as well, to do some more events because they're just so much fun. They're Neil and all of the guys, all the good folks over at Head Flyer Brewing, Neil, Nate, Megan, Patrick, like everyone, Dan, all the guys there are just awesome to hang out with. And so couldn't recommend more going to Head Flyer Brewing in Northeast Minneapolis. You had a great time there with the Wolves. Go back there all summer long. You're going to have a great time as well.
No doubt about it. Now tell everybody about our friends at Shepherd Goods and Lamb Chops clothing line.
SGLambchops.com is the place to go for some of the most comfortable, stylish, affordable clothes that you can ever think about. Sweatpants, hoodies, shorts, t-shirts, everything and anything that you could want that's casual but comfortable and makes you look good. Go to Shepherd Goods and Lamb Chops Clothing. If you go to sglambchops.com, you use the promo code JONK20 for 20% off any of your purchases there. Jordan and Craig are huge Timberwolves fans. They're always at the game, sitting courtside, and they're always wearing super cool stuff from Lamb Chops clothing. And so I've always said the shorts that I have from Lamb Chops are the most comfortable and the best looking shorts that I own. And I love their t-shirts. I love their hoodies. I love everything that they have there. And so sglambchops.com, hang out till the end of this show. We will answer a Twitter question, and the winner will get a free pair of those great shorts that Lamb Chops had. So JONK20 for 20% off at sglambchops.com.
So if Kyle leaves, what do they replace him with? And if Kyle stays, what can they add to this roster?
Yeah, so I think that there was a hope that through last summer league, through the early portions of this season, maybe a player, one of their younger players, would emerge as not a perfect Kyle Anderson replacement, but certainly someone who is capable of playing 20 to 25 minutes, giving you good production, playing good defense, moving the ball, hitting the occasional shot. And so you look at who fits that bill. You look at, maybe it's Wendell Moore, maybe it is Josh Minott, kind of in that 3-4 mold of people. Leonard Miller, maybe he's a little bit more raw, so I don't think that you expected him to be ready, after 1 year. But certainly Josh Minott and Wendell Moore, you looked at and said, maybe those are guys who could slot into a rotation spot. And if they don't give us exactly what Kyle gives us, maybe they at least can bring some productivity and some really good just kind of consistency to that spot in the rotation. And, looking at it as it is now, I don't see either one of those players where you can just look at them and say, absolutely, we may take a slight step back with Kyle Anderson out versus these guys, but we'll be okay with it. I don't think, we just didn't see them play hardly at all, which indicates that Chris Finch did not have a whole lot of faith in their ability to be ready for this situation. So the other possibility is Monte Morris. Again, not close to the physical profile of Kyle Anderson, but in terms of a ball mover, in terms of a good decision maker, and a much better shooter than Kyle is, could he slot into that spot and take some of those minutes? Maybe, but again, he was out of the rotation in the playoffs. He barely played at all. And so I would imagine that he may want to look at other opportunities out there to see if there is a more consistent amount of playing time for him somewhere else. And so I don't know that they have a clear-cut option on the roster that's ready to take his minutes, unless Leonard Miller takes a big leap this summer and blossoms. But he's a real 4, and Kyle had to play a lot of the 3 just to get on the court this season. And so I don't know that Miller is going to be capable of doing that. So when you look outside, then you get into the diciness of, if Kyle Anderson goes, they don't have cap space to sign someone. You can't go sign a $9-10 million player with cap space to bring him back in. You're probably going to be mostly limited to veteran minimum type deals, to guys who want to take steep discounts to come and play on a real competitive team. They do have a competitive team to offer, but the problem is that they still are in Minnesota and they've only done it 1 year. Is that going to be enough to convince the NBA community at large that, hey, no, the Wolves are absolutely a destination place if you want to go chase a ring, or at least chase deep playoff success that you haven't had before, and so give it a shot. That is going to be a challenge for them. And that's why, again, I think that it is real possible that they will make a push to keep Kyle Anderson, because Kyle knows everything about this place. And even if he does have some limitations as as a player, it's going to be probably fewer of them than what they could get on the open market. So you wish that that you could really point to, oh yeah, Josh Minot will be ready. He can come in, he can play 3-4, he can get some rebounds, he can give you some energy. Maybe he will be able to do that, but we just haven't seen any evidence of that yet. And so I think that any development that you were hoping to see from Moore and Minot to say, yeah, they'll be ready to take Kyle Anderson's minutes, we just haven't seen that yet. It'll be a leap of faith.
Right. I think one lesson I learned or relearned this last series was, man, you just never, and it's funny because I always say this in baseball. I don't always say it in the NBA, but it's been proven true in the NBA now. You just got to wait on talent. You never give up on talent. Kyrie Irving has had an incredibly spotted career. Obviously great moments early, but he kind of embarrassed himself at times. He had injuries. He had declining production. And here he is at 32. And he basically won game one of this series. And he's the second best player on a team that might win the NBA championship again after all these years. Are you surprised that Kyrie's doing this right now?
I mean, I have to be. I'm not surprised at all, Jim, by his on-court ability. Like, I've never doubted his skill level. I've never doubted his ability to affect big games. We've seen it. We've seen him do it with the Cavaliers. I even in his dark days with Brooklyn and Boston, when he was on the floor, you could see him being effective. But what has surprised me is that he has, for whatever reason, and I don't know what that reason is, he has gotten to a point where all of the outside distractions, all of the things that were real problems for him in terms of keeping the focus on basketball, in terms of being available to play, all of those things, they have gone away. I mean, these used to be, it was to a point before he got to Dallas where I think a lot of the league, understandably so, was like, I do not want to be in the Kyrie Irving business. He's not reliable. How can we trust that this guy isn't going to come up with some next cause of the day to be aggrieved about, and that's going to affect how he works with his teammates, how he plays in an organization, how he kind of relates to coaches, all of those things. And so he just seems, in Dallas and being around him, he seems to have found a peace of mind that was not there before, that is allowing him to just put all of his energy and focus into playing the game. And when he is focused and when he does not have all of the chaos around him, he is an incredible basketball player. And so, I don't know what it took, or I don't know if there was just a moment of personal clarity, if just what Nico Harrison and the Mavericks organization has done to help him has been the big thing. I don't know what it is, but it has come full circle. And so that's the most surprising thing, is that he has gone through an entire season without any sort of distraction, without any sort of drama, and he's letting just the play do the talking for himself. And when that happens, he's just as gifted as almost any player who is in the league, who has come before him. He's an incredible player. So that's been the key to the whole thing for the Mavericks, is that just calmness, or that peace of mind that he has. It's made all the difference for them.
I was talking to my friend Brad Townsend, excellent basketball writer for the Dallas Morning News, and he was saying that he wondered if this might be the result, because Jason Kidd had some similarities in his career. He had a very public divorce. He had some public spats. He had some, he had an up and down career until he really figured things out. And I think Jason Kidd being Kyrie Irving's coach at this point in his life might be ideal.
Yeah, for sure. I think that, yes, number one, I think that, Jason Kidd, point guard, Kyrie Irving, point guard, Jason Kidd, kind of a revered player among hoop heads, like for his talent, his brains, his intelligence, his skill level, like all of those things. I think that he commands a certain respect from Kyrie Irving that maybe a Kenny Atkinson in Brooklyn did not. Pick any other coaches that he's dealt with. And so that's a big part of it, is that Jason Kidd has walked in Kyrie Irving's shoes, both as a player, and he has also been through a lot of issues off the court with the domestic violence stuff with his ex-wife and the struggles that way. He's also been incredibly criticized as an overall coach, as a tactician, all of those things. And he has dealt with all of those. And again, I'm not going to say he's overcome those, because a lot of those things are self-inflicted. He brought those
Right.
on himself, but he has experienced what it is like to be in the same kind of spotlight, I think, that Kyrie Irving has been in. And so there is an ability to relate to him. I think that helps, but it does appear, and like I don't know Kyrie well at all. I just I've seen him, kind of the way that he has moved and the way that he has operated in his career. It appears to me that having a coach like Jason Kidd, one who has won at a high level, as a Hall of Fame player, has a track record of success and all of those things, I think that helps for Kyrie Irving. I think some players need a coach with that kind of gravitas, like that, that can say, if it was a different type, a different profile of coach, it might be harder to get through to a player like Kyrie. But that seems to go. And also, Jim, you can speak to this too. Like, when you look at the way that Jason Kidd like operates in that space, he's soft spoken.
Yes.
And it's not about him. And I think that is probably resonating with Kyrie Irving as well. He is a very high powered head coach with a sterling playing record. But yet he doesn't make it about himself. And I think that that's a very good approach with this roster, with Luka, with Kyrie, with all of that. And he's not a look at me kind of head coach. And I think that was impressive to me, the way that he operated throughout that whole series.
Yeah, very, very well said, all of that. One quick note, and then we're going to have John's Twitter question for SG Lamb Chops clothing line. I don't think we need to spend all next year worrying about seeding.
You mean in terms of like,
I mean, that was the whole, all we talked about for like 82 fans talked about for 82 games.
Yeah.
Seeding, got to be the number one seed. You got to be the number one seed. You don't have to be the number one seed.
No, you're right. You're right. I think that there's a level of parity in the league now that is uncommon in its history. And we even saw it like with the Timberwolves, in terms of like they were much, much better on the road in the playoffs than at home in the playoffs. And so I do think that when you look at this team trying to make the next step next season, the West is going to be even better than it was this year, with Memphis coming back with Ja. I think Houston will be better. San Antonio will be better. There'll be just a bunch of teams that are going to improve. It's going to be even more challenging. But I think you're right in terms of it does not have to be breakneck for the 1 seed or the 2 seed. I think it has to be, let's make sure that when the Timberwolves are entering the playoffs, that A, they're healthy and that they have, full gas in the tank, but then B, that they are playing the way that they want to play. And especially offensively, which I think there's going to be huge improvements that need to be made there, but that they are doing that so that when they match up against any number of teams, that it's harder for one matchup to derail their entire existence. And we saw them match up really well against Phoenix, and match up really well against Denver, and they won those series. They didn't match up so well against Dallas, and it was a quick series. So I think I agree with you in terms of it's got to be much more holistically viewed next season. Now, clearly you want to stay out of the play-in. You don't want to do that.
Right.
But like you just want to be in a position where you are playing really good basketball and you are able to adapt to several different scenarios that you're going to face in those playoffs. And it doesn't matter as much if you have home court, if you have the top seed or anything like that. You just have to be playing your best, which is what happened with Dallas going into this.
Yeah, exactly right. All right, wrap up the show, John.
Yeah, so we have one more question from our Twitter question, sglambchops.com. Go to sglambchops.com and put in the promo code JONK20 for 20% off all the merchandise at Shepherd Good and Lamb's Chops Clothing. Triton Meldal asks, would adding a shot creator with the same core be better than moving a core piece for another star? And, that's a complicated question, but I think the right way to view it in terms of, I do think that what we learned in the Western Conference Finals was that this offense needs another shot creator, secondary playmaker type of a guy next to work with Anthony Edwards. Edwards was their main shot generator, offense generator, and the Mavericks could load up on him and make it very hard. Karl-Anthony Towns is not kind of the same shot creator, but they need another wing player who can take guys off of the dribble, get to the basket, maybe, drive and kick, do some of those things. So the question becomes, how do you find that? How do you add that without trading a core piece? That's going to be the challenging part, because maybe you might be able to add it in the draft, but you have a pick 27 in the first round of a weak draft. I don't think you should be expecting someone to come in and contribute right away to a contender at that spot. And so, is there a way to develop that? Can Jaden McDaniels, I, for one, think Jaden McDaniels might be the guy that you look at to increase his offensive workload this summer. He took some strides in that department this season, but I think he still has places to go. So you add it that way. If you don't add it from Jaden, it would appear to me to be that you might have to make a trade to go add that elsewhere. And it could be, Karl-Anthony Towns. It could be another player on the roster that just reconfigures your roster a little bit to bring in that other element. So I don't think it's as easy as just going and adding one, but I think the best avenue to add that dimension is if Jaden McDaniels really does kind of take another leap this summer and becomes more adept and more reliable in that department. So we'll see if that pans out or not.
Great thought there. Great season of podcasts, John. I appreciate all your work. Thank you to Brandon for all of his work at all times. Thanks to everyone who listens. We really do appreciate it. And we're going to have a fun summer talking about the Wolves and basketball in general. So stick with us here at Talk North.